Cliff May is president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and served as advisor to the Iraq Study Group, a congressional commission known as the Baker-Hamilton Commission. The UK Daily Telegraph has described Cliff May as one of America's most highly influential opinion leaders.
My organization, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, was created just in the wake of the 9/11 attacks with inspiration and help from Jeane Kirkpatrick and Jack Kemp, and since then Jim Woolsey and Newt Gingrich and others have been instrumental in working with us on these issues. Although I can tell you the people who thought about this, including Jack Kemp and including Jeane Kirkpatrick, thought about it before 9/11. In fact, I met with them for the first time as a consultant 1 week before 9/11 to talk about the threat of terrorism and the tendency to apologize for terrorism and the tendency to think that terrorism was not a great threat to the United States. And what they were saying to me is, look, the government doesn't seem to get it, most of the think tanks don't get it, we need to do something else to focus on this problem. Let's talk about this and let's give it some consideration. That was 1 week before 9/11. It happened, I met with them, I said, well, what you anticipated has come to pass sooner rather than later. That scares me when I hear people say, as Peter and others have, we could have a solar EMP event any day. Any day, we're overdue for it. And when we know that the Iranians and others are working on these capabilities, and that for 30 years the Iranians have had as their rallying cry, death to America, as Ahmadinejad has put it, a world without America is achievable. He means something by that, and we ignore that kind of threat at our peril. Jim Woolsey likes to say that the real problem is a lack of imagination. Too many people can't imagine the kinds of things we're talking about and don't really attempt to. And think about it in terms of 9/11. 8th anniversary, after all, is tomorrow. In 1983, terrorists used a truck and explosives to slaughter 241 American Marines in their barracks in Beirut. In 1993, Islamist terrorists used a truck and explosives in an attempt to bring down the World Trade Center in New York. In 1996, we had the Khobar Towers, where we had servicemen stationed in Saudi Arabia, attacked with Iranian involvement that we decided, our government decided, essentially to ignore. In 1998, 2 American embassies were bombed in Africa. In 2000, the USS Cole was hit by a boat containing suicide bombers and explosives. Now, first of all, how much imagination would it have taken to say, let's see, they've attacked us with truck bombs and boat bombs, vehicles and bombs as a method of attack. What else might they use? Motor scooters, roller skates? What about an airplane? What about an airplane? What if they used an airplane as a missile? Couldn't they do that? Wait a minute. Weren't there some terrorists who were attempting to do that in Asia not that long ago? What are we going to do about airplanes and terrorism? Should we lock the doors of the cockpits? Should we teach pilots to roll the plane over when they have people who won't sit down and who are threatening the plane? There's all sorts of things you can do. We did nothing because we were trapped in a lack of imagination. And we were thinking of such things as, well, years ago, I'm sure the terrorists would take a hijacked plane to Cuba. Surely the terrorists don't want to get killed themselves, do they? And of course, the answer is, yes, of course they do. Of course they do. This gets back to the subject of deterrence that Peter was talking about. If you have the religious convictions, and they are that, of somebody like Ahmadinejad, if you're a true Khomeinist, then deterrence doesn't really operate. Bernard Lewis is perhaps the greatest living scholar of Islam in the Middle East. He's in his 90s, sharp as a tack. He's studied this stuff since the 1930s. He says, if you believe, as an Ahmadinejad does, that the Mahdi, the hidden imam, a sort of a messiah figure, will only come back when there are millions of people screaming in agony, when there is an apocalypse, then you're not frightened of the apocalypse. You don't want to avoid the apocalypse. You want to encourage it. What Bernard Lewis said is, if you have the religious convictions of an Ahmadinejad, mutually assured destruction is not a deterrent. It's an inducement. It's an inducement. So we have the wrong strategy and the wrong means of dealing with this because we fail to imagine people different from us, people with different values, and the ways they may want to come at us. This is a very dangerous thing. The question arises, how are we going to get this information out to a public that is resistant to hear it, a public that thinks we have too many problems already. We have global warming and the polar bears are all going to fry. And we have to worry about healthcare. That's top on our list. That's all the media is covering. It's going to be very challenging. And my hope is that this meeting will be the beginning of some serious thought on how we do this, because it can be done. It's going to require, I would argue, and this is what I hope we can have some discussion of, forming a coalition of like-minded organizations who care about this issue, who can work together, perhaps on a very informal basis, perhaps on a more formal basis. That doesn't matter, but you need a coalition of organizations making this issue a high priority. You are going to need very much, I would say, to prepare simplified materials on this sort of stuff. People's attention spans nowadays have been formed by the likes of MTV. They are not going to do what you people are willing to do, which is sit in a conference hall and listen and read for days on end. We're going to have to find ways to get this across credibly in very, very short time. What's the problem? What's the solution? What you can do. We're going to need, I would argue, a grassroots movement. It can be voluntary. We're going to need 50 state chairmen or 25 regional chairmen, voluntary again, who will be getting information from a central source in a way that people can digest it easily, that they can distribute to their email lists, that they can call meetings together and have people talk about it. And then, super important, where they can, on a local basis, be reminding their congressmen that this is an issue they care about intensely, and they expect their member of Congress, their senators, to do so as well. The attention of congressmen is a very difficult thing to get hold of because they're being hit from so many sides. You have those like Roscoe Bartlett I admire greatly because he understands the importance of this issue and would do it if nobody was calling him, if nobody was supporting him on it. But for many other members of Congress, of 30 issues, what do my constituents care about? What do they care about most? Where's the intensity? Where am I going to lose votes? Where am I going to have phone calls? They need to be getting these phone calls and they need to feel there's a very intense group on this issue. I better be able to speak about it. I better consider my positions on it. I better think about what I'm going to do. And that gets to the next section of what needs to be done is the grass tops movement, which does communicate then with an interested congressman, with the media, which, as Peter points out, has not been all over this issue. Yeah, you get something in, you get Brett Stevens to write a review. You get me and others will write something on missile defense or on EMP occasionally. But no, you're not seeing this on TV. Not at all, and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of pressure to get the media to say, this is an important and interesting issue. These are some of the things we have to do if we are going to prevent a continental shutdown, the topic that we're discussing here today. The last time we had a Holocaust, it was largely because people didn't believe that such a thing was possible. Didn't believe that the Nazis would rather slaughter millions of Jews when they could put them to work as slave laborers. Well, it was unimaginable, unimaginable. And now we have Ahmadinejad saying, yes, a world without America is achievable, and yes, the Iranians can wipe Israel off the map, and they are not worried about counterattacks. If there is one lesson to take away from the Holocaust that we absolutely have to learn, it is simply this. When people say they mean to kill you, take them seriously. Thanks very much, and I hope we can have a bit of a discussion of some of these points.